Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are in our 9th session already of Signum Academy's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone Camp. Can you believe that? We've got today and tomorrow, and that's it. And we'll have gone through the entire book, which is pretty cool. Let me share my screen with you so we can start in with some of today's material. We're going to be talking about the Forbidden Forest. Isn't that going to be cool? That is one of the neatest places on the Hogwarts grounds and one of the scariest. There are things in there that you would not want to meet, right? Okay, well, let's take a minute like we always do to review and just talk about some of the themes that we've been discussing over these last sessions of the camp. We've been talking about interpretations and misinterpretations. Sometimes characters get it right. A lot of times that they get it wrong. And we're going to see a big misinterpretation today in just a couple of minutes. We've been talking about appearance versus reality. That's huge in the wizarding world, isn't it? Things are not as they seem in Harry Potter's universe. We've been talking about JK Rowling's writing style. The way she uses words not just to tell us things, but to really show us, to paint pictures in our brains, to help us see her story, not just hear about it, not just read it. We've been talking about her wordplay too, how she does interesting and fun stuff with words sometimes. We've been asking ourselves a couple questions. Why doesn't Dumbledore come to the rescue? You know, Harry's in all these situations sometimes. He's been with his aunt and uncle for all those years. How come Dumbledore didn't step in and save the day? And we've been kind of working our way toward an answer of that, thinking about how Harry has grown and learned through all these tough experiences that he's had. He's learned what he doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to be the Dursleys. He doesn't want to be Dudley. He doesn't want to be Draco Malfoy. And he knows that he wants to be something else. He wants to be something better. So it's taught him a lot, Dumbledore not coming to the rescue, right? We're going to think more about that, especially tomorrow. We've been talking about, too, how Harry becomes Harry. And we're seeing now how those two questions are tying together, aren't they? Harry becomes Harry, not in spite of all the stuff that's happened, maybe, but because of all the stuff that's happened to him. He has learned, he has grown, and he's become the person that he is through all the different hardships that he's suffered. And we'll see more about that tomorrow too, but just keep these questions in the back of your brains as we go through the book. Like I said, these aren't the only themes and questions that we can ask. Good books, good literature, multiple themes and questions. But these are the ones we're focusing in on. And you might be coming up with others. And don't be afraid to explore them. If you do, that's part of reading books like this. All right, let's get started on today's material, the Forbidden Forest. Now, when we left Harry and Hermione yesterday, they had made a huge mistake, hadn't they? Huge. Remember what they did? They were so relieved when they got rid of Norbert. They left the invisibility cloak at the top of the highest tower. And as they were coming down the stairs, they ran into Filch. Oh my goodness. As Filch said, we are in trouble now. And indeed they are. Now Filch takes them to Professor McGonagall's office, doesn't he? And Harry is thinking at this point, how could we be so stupid? How could we have done this? We forgot the cloak. How could things be any worse? Until Professor McGonagall walks in with Neville. Now, Neville was trying to warn them. Poor Neville. Doesn't he always get the worst end of everything, right? He was trying to warn them, trying to tell them that Malfoy was out there, going to be turning them in if he could, and he gets caught too. So Professor McGonagall, she is steaming. You can almost see the smoke coming out her ears, right? She is mad. And Professor McGonagall, she's got a temper under there, doesn't she? She can look all stern and prim and proper, and she gets ticked off, though. and 3 Gryffindors and a Slytherin out of bed in one night, beyond her tolerance. She's ticked off, and she demands that they explain themselves, except no one answers. Not even Hermione. Like Harry said, this was the first time he's ever seen Hermione not answer a teacher's question. But what can they say? They can't tell about the dragon, can they? Without getting Hagrid in trouble, and they don't want to do that. So they're in quite a predicament. Except Professor McGonagall, she thinks she knows exactly what's going on. I think I've got a good idea of what's been going on, said Professor McGonagall. It doesn't take a genius to work it out. You fed Draco Malfoy some cock and bull story about a dragon, trying to get him out of bed and into trouble. I've already caught him. I suppose you think it's funny that Longbottom here heard the story and believed it too. Well, the problem is, the professor couldn't be more wrong, could she? She's done what we think Harry might be doing and has done all along. She's misinterpreted what she's seen. She's got some evidence in front of her. She's got Draco Malfoy saying, Harry Potter's coming with a dragon. She's got Harry and Hermione and Neville before her. Neville mumbling something about trying not to get about a dragon and all kinds of things. And Professor McGonagall looks at all this evidence and she gets it wrong. She doesn't realize that there really was a dragon. Of course, they don't want her to either, do they? Would you? Well, I don't think I'd want her to know that. They can't tell her the truth. They can't say anything to Neville right then, so he's hurt and confused. Okay, so even Professor McGonagall, even a teacher, even an adult, can misread a situation and jump to the wrong conclusion. Hasn't that become a theme in our story? We've seen that all the way along. People seeing and hearing things around them and getting it wrong, coming to the wrong conclusion, making a misinterpretation. And this time, Professor McGonagall is so angry that she takes 50 points from Gryffindor each. Ooh, that hurts, doesn't it? 50 points from Gryffindor each. That's 150 points. Now, I got to ask you guys a question. What do you think? Is this a fair punishment for Harry, Ron, and Hermione? They get detention too. But remember what she gave Malfoy. She gave him a detention, yes. And she took 20 points off Slithering. Do you think it's fair to take 50 points each from Gryffindor? And why do you think she did it? Somebody type in. Remember, you can use that question box. What do you think? Is it fair, and why did she do that? What do you think, you guys? 20 points from Slytherin, 50 points each from Gryffindor. They were all out of bed. Somebody's got an answer. Let's see. Maybe to make Malfoy think he gotten away with something? Perhaps. Okay, I'll ask you to remember something. Remember Professor McGonagall's interpretation. She thinks that Harry and Hermione made up a story to deliberately get another student or two out of bed and into trouble. Okay, now really, it was kind of Malfoy doing that, right? He was trying to get Harry and Hermione into trouble, but she doesn't know that. So in her eyes, Harry and Hermione, they have the worst crime. They, as far as she sees it, they were trying to get another student into trouble, trying to make up this big story, and she is just furious about it. Okay, so that may be one of the reasons. She thinks it wasn't Malfoy's fault. Exactly. That's exactly right. She thinks it was completely Harry and Hermione's fault. And poor Neville, he kind of went along for the ride. So she takes 50 points each from Gryffindor because she thinks her Gryffindors did the worst thing here. And also, I think because she's really angry. Okay? And they can't tell her. They can't tell her the truth without getting Hagrid into trouble. So they take the punishment on themselves rather than allowing Hagrid to get in trouble for having an illegal dragon. Okay, and that doesn't mean that they're happy about it though, right? Quite the opposite. You know, they've got these points taken away. They've got this detention now that they have to do. But the worst thing for Harry and Hermione and Neville is the disgrace. They are disgraced in the eyes of Gryffindor. From being one of the most popular and admired people at the school, Harry was suddenly the most hated. Even Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs turned on him because everyone had been longing to see Slytherin lose the House Cup. Everywhere Harry went, people pointed and didn't trouble to lower their voices as they insulted him. Slytherins, on the other hand, clapped as he walked past them, whistling and cheering, "Thanks, Potter, we owe you one." That's the worst thing for Harry and Hermione and Neville, the way their fellow students are treating them. Poor Harry, I agree, right? The Gryffindors are shocked, they're furious. Only Ron offers sympathy because he knows what's going on. Nobody's speaking to Harry, not even his fellow Quidditch players. Remember, they don't speak to him at practice, and when they have to talk about him, they don't even use his name. They just call him the Seeker. Okay? Nobody bothered to ask what happened, why this happened. Okay, what do you think? What do you think of the other students' reactions to this? Now, they're shocked, right? 150 points gone just like that. But what do you think of their reactions? Is it too harsh? I think the other students are getting pretty carried away. Yep, the House Cup is important, right? Everybody wants to see Slytherin lose, basically. The Gryffindors certainly want to see Gryffindor win. But perhaps they're making a little bit too much of this at the expense of other people's feelings. Okay, they didn't stop to think why Harry and Hermione and Neville might have been out of bed, that there might have been a reason for it. They're too focused on winning something, or not winning something in this case, than to think about what another person might be going through. Have you ever seen this? Okay, we might think about a sporting team sometimes. Okay, let's say somebody makes a mistake in the game. How do you treat that person if you're on the same team? It costs you the game, maybe. It's an honest mistake or there's a good reason for it. How do you treat that person? Do you treat them like the Gryffindors treat Harry and Hermione and Neville? Or do you try to understand what happened? You might be upset about it, but remember, human beings have to come first. Winning things, that's second. And the Gryffindors forget that. They forget to put their fellow Gryffindors first and find out what happened and why it happened, rather than just saying, okay, we're going to shut you out completely. You're in disgrace. And Harry, he resolves something. He resolves to mind his own business in the future. Enough trying to help out people and figure out what's going on here. I'm just going to stick to myself and mind my own business. Well, how long does that last? I'd say about a paragraph and a half. Because he overhears something new just a short while later. He overhears Professor Quirrell again. No, not again. Please. It sounded as though someone was threatening him. Harry moved closer. All right, he heard Quirrell sob. Next second, Quirrell came hurrying out of the classroom straightening his turban. He was pale and looked as though he was about to cry. What does Harry interpret? How does he interpret these events, these things that he hears, these things that he sees? What does he think happened? Do you remember? Who do you think, or who did he think was talking to Quirrell? Remember who was talking to him before when he heard Quirrell doing that? Yeah, Snape, exactly. Harry thinks he's just overheard Quirrell's part of a conversation between Quirrell and Snape. And he thinks now that Quirrell has finally agreed to tell Snape how he has contributed to protecting the stone. But the problem is, do Quirrell's words say that? Look at what he says. He says, no, no, not again, please. And then, all right, all right. That's a pretty far cry from, yes, I will give you the secret of my protection of the stone. Isn't it? Harry is basing his interpretation on very little here. And it's because of what he already thinks he knows. Okay? So he is absolutely sure now that Quirrell's given in to Snape. That he's given him the protection that he's done on the stone. He's told him what it is and how to get past it. But Harry's right about something else too when he tells Ron and Hermione about this. Hermione, remember, thinks they should go straight to Dumbledore. All right, enough's enough. This is beyond us. We can't do this anymore on our own. I mean, what? We're 11 and 12-year-olds. How are we going to keep handling this? But Harry has an argument against that. But we've got no proof, said Harry. Quirrell's too scared to back us up. Snape's only got to say he doesn't know how the troll got in at Halloween and that he was nowhere near the 3rd floor. Who do you think they'll believe, him or us? It's not exactly a secret we hate him. Dumbledore will think we made it up to get him sacked. Filch wouldn't help us if his life depended on it. He's too friendly with Snape. And the more students get thrown out, the better, he'll think. And don't forget, we're not supposed to know about the stone or Fluffy. That'll take a lot of explaining, I'll say. But perhaps Harry ought to take his own advice. We've got no proof. And that's true. What do they have against Snape? Let's see. They think that he was trying to kill Harry by cursing the broomstick. But there's another potential explanation for that they haven't explored. Actually, there's several other. How many people were in that stand, those stands that day, right? We've got an overheard conversation between Snape and Quirrell. Partly overheard. Sounds pretty bad, right? Snape is sounding pretty threatening, but it doesn't prove that Snape is after the stone. And we've got this little overheard few words of Quirrell saying, all right, all right. That's a big, huge leap to make to Snape is trying to steal the Sorcerer's Stone, and now he's going to be successful because he got Quirrell's information out of him. Okay, so perhaps Harry ought to take his own advice. They don't really have any proof, and yet they are positive that they're correct. Now, what do you think would have happened if they had decided to go to Dumbledore? Do you think Dumbledore would have listened to them? What do you think? Should they have gone to Dumbledore at this point? You're right, they don't have any proof. What would have happened if they did? I wonder. Sometimes it's kind of fun to think of stories like that, right? To think of an alternative way or an alternative chain of events that might have happened if one character had changed somehow. It's not the story we have. We know they don't go to Dumbledore, at least not right now. But sometimes it's kind of fun to think about, what if? What would have happened if this had turned out differently? Okay, I kind of think Dumbledore would have listened to them. I kind of think maybe Dumbledore might have given them a few extra hints. He seems to know a lot about what's going on in the castle, doesn't he? He knew that Harry was looking into the Mirror of Erised. He showed up at that second Quidditch game. I think Dumbledore has a pretty good idea of what's going on everywhere in Hogwarts. Okay, now in the midst of this, Harry and Hermione, get the right character, right? Oh yes, Dumbledore was a Gryffindor. Yes, indeed, he was. Oh, and that reminds me too, I was going to start with this, but since we're talking about Dumbledore, the question came in yesterday about how old Dumbledore is. Dumbledore was born in August of 1881. Now, the year our story takes place is 1991. So at this point, Dumbledore is 110 years old. And that seems really old to us, doesn't it? But remember, people in the wizarding world live longer sometimes. And Dumbledore is one of those. So he's 110 at the time our story takes place. Okay, so in the midst of all this, Harry and Hermione, did it again, didn't I? Harry and Hermione forget something. They have to do their detentions yet. And they receive a note from Professor McGonagall telling them to meet Filch at 11 o'clock at the front doors to do their detentions. "Follow me," said Filch, lighting a lamp and leading them outside. "I bet you'll think twice about breaking a school rule again, won't you, eh?" he continued, leering at them. "Oh, yes, hard work and pain are the best teachers, if you ask me. It's just a pity they let the old punishments die out. Hang you by your wrists from the ceiling for a few days. I've got the chains still in my office. Keep 'em well oiled in case they're ever needed. Right, off we go. And don't think of running off now. It'll be worse for you if you do." Filch is gleeful, isn't he? He is very pleased that these four kids, Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Malfoy, are going to have to do detention. Detention with Filch, oh, I know, right? Luckily, they don't have to stay with him, right? It's bad enough to just be with him on the walk from the castle, because he is really rubbing it in, isn't he? Big time rubbing it in. He is so happy that they're going to be punished, and he doesn't hesitate to try to scare them. All this talk about the old punishments and hanging you from the ceiling by your wrists. Okay, maybe all of a sudden their own punishment doesn't seem so bad anymore. But it sure does to Malfoy, and the others aren't real happy either, because they find out that they're going to be going into the forest, the Forbidden Forest. And Filch tells them that he is much mistaken if they'll come out in one piece. And he'll be back at dawn for what's left of them. Well, that's enough to make anybody nervous, isn't it? They're probably already scared enough about what they're going to be doing. And Malfoy, he doesn't hesitate to speak up, does he? He is scared silly. So he tries to make a little protest here, but doesn't get him very far. But this is servant stuff. It's not for students to do. I thought we'd be writing lines or something. If my father knew I was doing this, he'd tell you that's how it is at Hogwarts, Hagrid growled. Writing lines. What good's that to anyone? You'll do something useful or you'll get out. If you think your father'd rather you were expelled, then go back to the castle and pack. Go on. Oh, somebody'd run. Remember what Filch said, though, that it's worse for you if you run. Okay, so Malfoy, he's trying to get off on this servant stuff again. Remember what he said the first time Harry met him? About Hagrid? Well, he's kind of a servant, isn't he? And remember what we thought at the time when we read that? We thought, oh, he's so stuck up. He's so arrogant. He thinks he's better than everybody. Well, he still does. And now he's trying to use that, isn't he? I thought we'd be writing lines. And Hagrid's like, writing lines. Yeah, that never did anybody any good. You're going to do something useful, or you'll get out. Go on, back to the castle, go pack. Well, that stops Malfoy in his tracks, doesn't it? And the task they're going to do, that is something very useful and very important. And Hagrid goes on to explain that. Look there, said Hagrid. See that stuff shining on the ground, silvery stuff? That's unicorn blood. There's a unicorn in there been hurt badly by something. This is the second time in a week. I found one dead last Wednesday. We're going to try and find the poor thing. We might have to put it out of its misery. Okay, so there's been a unicorn hurt somewhere in the forest. This is the second time. Now, this is really an odd situation. Hagrid's never seen this before, he says a little bit later. Okay, unicorns are powerful, pure, beautiful, magical creatures. And for something to hurt them is a horrible, horrible, and unusual thing. This is something that doesn't happen very often. So for their detention, the 4 kids are going to be helping Hagrid track down this poor hurt unicorn. Now, Hagrid knows the forest very well. Do you think this is something that he really needed help with? What do you think? Could Hagrid have done this on his own? Remember how well he knows the forest. Nope, somebody doesn't think Hagrid could do this. Okay, you think Hagrid does need some help. Maybe to split up like they do and cover more ground at night. That's possible, sure. Somebody else says, yeah, okay, so we've got 2 different interpretations going on. Maybe Hagrid needed some help, right? Okay, that's possible. And maybe he could have done it on his own and just thought, you know, these kids have to do detention. I really like 3 of them. Malfoy, well, maybe not so much. But at least 3 of them are friendly. They're Gryffindors. I'm going to take them to do their detention with me. I'm going to get them through this detention. We'll do something useful, but they'll be safe because they're with me. Maybe Hagrid was thinking something along those lines. Okay, maybe he asked Professor McGonagall if he could have their help for their detention. Maybe. The book doesn't tell us. We can think about these things. Or did somebody else suggest the detention? Maybe knowing that Harry needed another piece of the puzzle. Keep that in mind. Okay, so they enter the forest. Harry and Hermione start out with Hagrid. Neville and Draco go with Fang, the boarhound. Although Hagrid warns them right from the start, he's a coward, that Fang. Again, hey, appearance versus reality, right? Fang looks like he shouldn't be afraid of anything. Remember that big bark? And he's huge? And yet, Hagrid says, he's a coward. Appearance versus reality, they're different things. Okay, so they're walking through the forest. And remember, they said if you have trouble, send up some red sparks. That was their warning sign. Red sparks if you have trouble. So they're walking through, they're walking along. Harry and Hermione are pretty nervous and pretty glad they're with Hagrid at this point. But then, Hagrid seized Harry and Hermione and hoisted them off the path behind a towering oak. He pulled out an arrow and fitted it into his crossbow, raising it, ready to fire. The 3 of them listened. Something was slithering over dead leaves nearby. It sounded like a cloak trailing along the ground. Hagrid was squinting up the dark path, but after a few seconds, the sound faded away. So something is slithering down the path. It sounds like a cloak slithering along the ground. But it's a noise that Hagrid has never heard in the forest before. There's something in there that shouldn't be, Hagrid said. Something in there that's not right. Not something usual. Notice how JK Rowling is building our suspense here. She does a very good job with that in this chapter. You know what suspense is? It's that feeling of tension, that feeling where you get more and more and more worked up. You're building up and you're wondering, what's going to happen next? Where's all this going? And she's setting us up, isn't she? We're going into the forest with Hagrid. We're splitting off in groups. We're going down these dark paths with these spooky trees over us and all these strange sounds and things that we don't know. And we know in the back of our brains, this is the forbidden forest. Students aren't supposed to be in here. There's dangerous things in here. And this is building and building, and all of a sudden, we hear a noise. Something slithering along the path. And Hagrid said, there's something in here that shouldn't be. We're on the edge of our seats. Okay, so if we're paying attention, it's almost like a movie buildup, right? We've all seen movies that have done this. Usually they've got kind of scary music playing in the background. We can almost hear the music, right? When we're thinking about this. I can't remember the music from the movie. But we can almost hear the music in the background building up and that scary notes behind these scenes. Okay, but JK Rowling does this with words. Okay, something was slithering. Notice the word that she chooses here. You can hear it in the word, can't you? You can hear the sound, slithering. She does a nice job here with her word choice. Okay, and then something is slithering around along the ground and it fades away. But the next moment, Harry and Hermione about jump out of their skins because something walks down the path toward them. It's not the thing that was slithering. What is it? Do you remember what they see next? Or rather, who they see next? They meet one of the forest's inhabitants, something that should be there. Yeah, a centaur. That's right, a centaur. Half man, half horse. Yep, somebody else got it too. Very good. Another creature right out of Greek mythology. Centaurs. Okay, half man, half horse. And Hagrid knows these guys. Or actually, there's just one to start with, Ronan. Ronan the centaur. Now Hagrid, he knows him. And he asks, okay, explains, there's a unicorn that's been hurt in here. Have you seen anything, Ronan? Remember how he answers? Ronan didn't answer immediately. He stared unblinkingly upwards, then sighed again. Always the innocent are the first victims, he said. So it has been for ages past. So it is now. Yeah, said Hagrid, but have you seen anything, Ronan? Anything unusual? Mars is bright tonight, Ronan repeated, while Hagrid watched impatiently. Unusually bright. Notice I put the centaur's help in quotation marks up here. Sometimes we do that when we mean the exact opposite of what we're saying, right? Or sometimes we use air quotes. Have you seen people do that? Yeah, he was sure a big help, which means exactly the opposite. He wasn't. The problem is here that the Centaur and Hagrid have two very different ways of looking at the world. Now, centaurs are astrologers, okay? Not astronomers, but astrologers. An astrologer is somebody who tries to read the planets and the stars and understand what's happening now and what will happen in the future. So they look to the skies and try to see the patterns and things that are written there to predict the future or explain what's happening now. And that's what centaurs do. Now notice, Hagrid doesn't set much store by this. You remember what he calls the centaurs afterwards? Ruddy stargazers. As in, they're no help at all. Hagrid's grounded in the practical. He's thinking here and now. What's my task at this immediate moment, and how do I get it done? What he's looking for from Ronan is perhaps an answer about the creature he saw earlier and what was slithering along the ground. Now, that would have been a practical answer, right? Have you seen anything unusual? We might want Ronan to answer, well, yes, I just saw this thing in a cloak go that way. You might want to follow it. And no, what does Ronan say? He gives us a proverb. Always the innocent are the first victims. So it has been for ages past. So it is now. Well, yes, that's true. A proverb is a true statement. A statement that's been used for a long time that everybody kind of agrees is true and wise. But it doesn't help Hagrid find the unicorn or figure out what's going on. And anything unusual, Ronan? Mars is bright tonight. Exceptionally bright. And Hagrid's thinking, yeah, well, thanks a lot. A little further to the earth, please, if you would, Ronan, really. Okay, so centaurs, they're high up in their focus. They're not looking at the things around them. They're looking at the stars. They're trying to read the patterns. They're trying to figure out what's going on in the world and what will happen in the future. Hagrid's down to earth. He wants to know what's going on right now, right here in the forest. So their perspectives clash completely, and the centaurs are no help to Hagrid at all. Remember when Bane comes up, the second centaur? Remember how he answers Hagrid's, you seen anything unusual, Bane? Mars is bright tonight. Yeah, so we've heard, says Hagrid. You're no help. Okay, centaurs. Ruddy stargazers, they just can't keep their minds on anything down here, closer than the moon. What a frustration. Okay, the next thing that happens, though, is something a little scarier, at least for Ron or Harry and Hermione and Hagrid. They see the warning signal. They see the red sparks. And that's a sign that Neville and Draco and Fang, they're in trouble. So Hagrid dashes off. Hermione and Harry are left to wait in suspense. And they wait, and they wait, and at last, a great crunching noise announced Hagrid's return. Malfoy, Neville, and Fang were with him. Hagrid was fuming. Malfoy, it seemed, had sneaked up behind Neville and grabbed him for a joke. Neville had panicked and set up the sparks. Leave it to Malfoy to have the world's worst timing, right? Here they are in the middle of the forest in a dangerous situation. There's something in this forest that shouldn't be. And he goes and grabs Neville for a joke. Why do you think he did that? Why would Malfoy choose right now and this way as a joke? I kind of wonder if it's helping him cope with his own fear. Remember how terrified Malfoy is about going into the forest? He's scared silly. And he thinks, or maybe he doesn't even get as far as thinking, but there's something in his head that tells him, I'm going to pull this joke on Neville, and it's going to get out some of my nerves somehow. So he grabs Neville from behind. Yeah, he wanted to go home. I think that's right, too. Maybe he thought if he put up the red sparks, or Neville did for him, maybe they'd get out of this forest and go back to the castle. Yeah, well, it didn't work. We know that. Instead, Hagrid pairs up Harry with Malfoy and Fang. Because as Hagrid whispers to Harry, Malfoy's going to have a lot harder time frightening Harry, which is probably true. Okay, so the hunt continues. They're still out to look for this unicorn that's been hurt. That's still the purpose. That's still the task that they've got. They need to find this poor injured creature. And they follow the trail of blood. And Harry and Malfoy, they notice that trail's getting thicker. Like the poor thing had kind of thrashed around quite a bit. And eventually they see something bright white was gleaming on the ground. They inched closer. It was the unicorn, all right, and it was dead. Harry had never seen anything so beautiful and sad. Its long, slender legs were stuck out at odd angles where it had fallen, and its mane was spread pearly white on the dark leaves. Look at the language that Rowling uses here. Something bright white. Remember, we've been talking about the darkness of the forest. Here is something bright white that's actually gleaming on the ground. Gleaming suggests light coming up from it somehow. And so beautiful and so sad. Normally we don't put those two words together, do we? Beautiful and sad. But this dead unicorn is both. Beautiful because he's a unicorn. He's gorgeous. He's gleaming bright white. And yet he's sad because he's dead. And he's got these long, slender, beautiful legs. But look at how they're sticking out at odd angles because he fell. And his mane is pearly white over the dark leaves. So we've got this contrast between dark and light, between grace and the oddness of death. Something is not as it should be. Something has gone wrong. This beautiful, innocent thing is lying here dead. But that's not all. Ron and Malfoy, excuse me, I keep writing the wrong kids today, don't I? Let's try to get the right kids. Harry and Malfoy and Fang see. Something else is present in that forest. Harry had taken one step toward it, the unicorn, when a slithering sound made him freeze where he stood. A bush on the edge of the clearing quivered. Then, out of the shadows, a hooded figure came crawling across the ground like some stalking beast. Harry, Malfoy, and Fang stood transfixed. The cloaked figure reached the unicorn. It lowered its head over the wound in the animal's side and began to drink its blood. Ooh, can you picture that? It's enough to make shivers go down your spine, isn't it? It's horrible. We've got this beautiful, graceful unicorn that's just gleaming, even in death. And then we've got this dark figure crawling, not even walking, but crawling across the ground like a stalking beast. Look at the contrast between the unicorn and this figure. Now, Harry and Malfoy, they can't even move. They're so shocked. And they watch as this thing lowers its head and drinks the unicorn's blood. Well, that's enough for Malfoy and Fang. Yes, Fang is a coward. They take off like a shot. They're not sticking around with this thing any longer than they have to. But Harry can't move. He's too scared, and he feels like his scar is on fire. Now, second time he's felt this. Remember the first time? That was at the opening feast, the start of term feast. And he's so frightened, and his scar is hurting. And he doesn't know this creature is getting up and is coming toward him. It's seen him. We've got this tension. Remember, we've talked about the suspense and the tension? It's built and built and built. And now we're at what we call the climax. Remember that word climax. It means highest point. Okay, this is the climax of this scene. Harry is facing this cloaked figure who's been drinking unicorn blood. And it gets up and it comes at him. And then he heard hooves just behind him, galloping, and something jumped clean over him, charging at the figure. The pain in Harry's head was so bad he fell to his knees. It took a minute or two to pass. When he looked up, the figure had gone. A centaur was standing over him, not Ronan or Bane. This one looked younger. He had white blonde hair and a palomino body. We've reached the climax of the tension and the suspense and the fear. We can share Harry's fear, right? And then, whew, relief. He's rescued. Another centaur was close by. He was right where he was supposed to be, right where he was needed. I wonder how that happened, how he came to be right at the right place at the right time. Was he watching? Did he learn of Harry's presence in the forest from Ronan and Bane? Okay. I kind of wonder, because the other centaurs, they show up pretty much right after. Okay, now this centaur, he's called Firenze. Firenze, it's an Italian name. And he knows he needs to get Harry out of there. So he does what most centaurs would never do. He invites Harry to get on his back and ride. Remember, centaur, half man, half horse. But they are proud creatures. We've seen this in Ronan and Bane already. Do you think those two would let somebody on their back? Probably not, right? Okay, but Firenze, he does it. He's going to let Harry get on his back and ride to safety. He's got to get him back to Hagrid. This thing is still in the forest. He's rescued him for now. But what if? Okay, so Ronan and Bane show up, and they see Harry on Firenze's back, and they don't like it. They're mad. They said, we have sworn ourselves not to set ourselves against the heavens. Okay, they think they've read what's to come. They think they know the future. They won't interfere. Ronan and Bane. Firenze will. He doesn't agree. Remember what he says. Do you not see that unicorn? Firenze bellowed at Bane. Do you not understand why it was killed? Or have the planets not let you in on that secret? I set myself against what is lurking in this forest, Bane. Yes, with humans alongside me, if I must. Now, what Rowling here is doing, she is just scratching the surface, just touching on a question that people have discussed, agonized over, thought about from as long as we can remember, as far as we know back. And that's the question of fate versus free will. Are things all set in stone, or can humans make a difference? Can humans make choices that might change things? Now, Ronan and Bane, they think everything is set in stone, and they're going to go along. They're not going to try to change it. They think the planets are right. They think they know exactly what the planets say to them. Firenze is different. He thinks that we can look at the planets, or centaurs can look at the planets and get it wrong. Misinterpret. Yeah, here's that theme again. right? Bane and Ronan, they think they've got their interpretation right. Firenze thinks that they can get it wrong. They can look at the signs and get it wrong. And he's going to set himself against what's in the forest. He thinks his choices, his actions can make a difference, can change things, no matter what the planets say, or no matter what Ronan and Bane and the other centaurs think the planets say. This is kind of complicated, isn't it? It's a very complex question. But Rowling is just kind of touching on it here, just to get us thinking. Or do we agree with the centaurs who think everything's set in stone, we just won't interfere? Our choices don't matter? Or do we agree with Firenze? We can misinterpret what we see, and yes, our choices, our actions do matter. Okay, so there's the dilemma. And Firenze, he knows that Harry needs more information. He knows that Harry has to start understanding what's going on in the forest. So he starts to explain in his own roundabout centaur type of way. Now, Harry had just said, we only use a unicorn tail, hairs, I think, and the horn in potions. Okay, so Firenze has asked him, what do you know about unicorns? Oh, well, not really too much. Okay, that is because it is a monstrous thing to slay a unicorn, said Firenze. Only one who has nothing to lose and everything to gain would commit such a crime. The blood of a unicorn will keep you alive, even if you are an inch from death, but at a terrible price. You have slain something pure and defenseless to save yourself, and you will have but a half-life, a cursed life, from the moment the blood touches your lips. Remember what Harry says? Well, wouldn't death be better? He is very wise. You will have a half-life, a cursed life. Well, wouldn't death be better? And Firenze agrees. Yes, death would be better than that kind of life, than slaying something so innocent and pure and beautiful to save yourself. That's the ultimate act of selfishness, isn't it? To kill something so perfect because you think you're more important. Your life is more important than the life of this beautiful creature. Oh, what do you do? Or what if you come across one that's already deceased and then got the blood? Well, that is a really good question. I'm actually not sure. I would have to think about that and look it up and see if that's been asked and answered somewhere else. So let me remember to do that, and we'll start that at the beginning of tomorrow's class, because that's one I don't want to ignore. That's a really good one. I just don't have a good answer for you right now. Okay, so let me look that up. Thank you. All right, and Firenze agrees, though, that this, death would be better than that. But do you know, Harry Potter, what is in that castle? The Sorcerer's Stone. Do you know what it does? It can create the elixir of life to make somebody immortal and not die. And Firenze says, can you think of no one at all, who might be satisfied with a half-life until he can get his hands on the stone? And then Harry knows. He knows who he's really up against. Voldemort. Voldemort, who is living a half-life and a cursed life already, who just wants to survive in some form or another until he can get the Sorcerer's Stone, make the elixir of life, and become immortal like he's always wanted to be. Okay, Harry knows all of a sudden. It's not Snape, or at least not Snape for himself. Remember, he still thinks that it's Snape, but just Snape working for Voldemort. Okay, so Firenze, he gets Harry safely back to Hagrid and the others. Okay, and they go back up to the castle, and Harry tells Ron and Hermione everything that's happened. And they talk most of the night. Remember, they talk until their voices get scratchy because they're trying to figure out what to do next. They've got another piece of the puzzle, a piece that they wouldn't have if they hadn't gone into the forest. Okay, and they go to bed at dawn. But Harry's got one more surprise in store for him. When Harry pulled back his sheets, he found his invisibility cloak folded neatly underneath them. There was a note pinned to it, just in case. Now, who do you think might have done that? Good question. All right, so we have come through the Forbidden Forest, and hasn't JK Rowling taken us on a journey, right? Most of us, at least on our first read, and some of us on just about every read afterwards, have been pretty scared silly by the Forbidden Forest. If we can put ourselves in Harry's place enough, if we can really use the words that JK Rowling uses and picture these scenes in our brains, it's enough to scare us. In a good way, in a fun storytelling way. So let's look at your journal question. For chapter 15, what do you think of the Centaurs? Oh, that's quite a question, isn't it? That's kind of open-ended. What do you think of the Centaurs? Remember, these are the ones who look to the stars, who think that they can read what's going on now and what will happen in the future in the stars. These are the ones, except Firenze, who don't think that their choices are going to make a difference. They think things are set in stone. Firenze, on the other hand, he thinks the stars can be read wrong. Centaurs can misinterpret things too, just like the human beings we've been seeing doing that all the way along here. And he thinks choices matter. He will set himself against whatever's in that forest, and he knows, along with the humans if he must. Okay, so what do you think overall? What do you think of the Centaurs? Write about it in your journals. Okay, so questions, comments. We're going to talk about what happens if we find a dead unicorn. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Good question. Anything else before we end today? Things that have excited you or scared you in this chapter. These are all things you can talk about in your groups too. Remember that. And if you want to email me, camp@signumu.org, and I would be glad to answer your questions. All right, so tomorrow we are going to finish the book. We are going to see what happens, how all these pieces of the puzzle finally come together in the conclusion of the story. Right, so we'll end for today. I don't see any questions coming in. So thank you for joining us for this 9th session of Signum Academy's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And we will see all of you magical people back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.